Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Kavinsky's Tutorials. Today I'm going to do a walkthrough, review and demo of Exosphere by Igor Vasiliev. So this is an app for making soundscapes basically, ambient soundscapes, maybe meditation music. I'm looking at the iPad version here, it works on iPhone as well, and on M1 or higher Macs. And here I'm using the plugin loaded inside the host app AUM. All we're hearing at the moment is Exosphere. These files are not playing at the moment. I'll use those later. This also works standalone, by the way. So in this video, I'll go through most of the main controls. I won't go through everything. There is a manual, but I'll go through all the most important stuff. I'll skip sort of boring things like stuff like how the preset system works and that kind of thing. You can always check that yourself in the manual. I don't want to make the video too long and too boring. Nobody benefits from that. So, flick through a few presets first. I'll just talk about the main basic concept of the app. So basically we have 5 samples loaded here. Each sample is part of a layer. So this layer with this didgeridoo sample, I just solo that here. That's called the core layer. And that's basically like a kind of droney bass type of content. And, you know, each layer has its own sort of purpose, and I'll talk a bit more about that later. Let's just solo the layers briefly first. Right, so we have these 5 layers. These samples are being processed by effects and stuff. There's a bit of granular processing going on, which allows you to repitch things and play with grain densities and detuning effects and stuff. There's a sequencer, which you can kind of use to morph between different settings or fade between different settings. We'll look at that later. It's not actually being used here at the moment. There's a randomizer that's very useful. There's some stuff tucked away in this more menu here, like toggling the sequencer on and off, or you know, a place where you can import files and stuff like that. And some settings and help, the user manual, which is just a big wall of text. Never really enjoy working through those manuals, so you're lucky I did that and you've got this video. So every layer has a bunch of parameters, and those will be slightly different for each layer. Oops. For example, this shard layer is the only one that has some settings for echo. Right, now I'm playing with the echo of that. Right? And we have controls here for LFOs, like here, for example, we're setting the rate and depth of a sine LFO to modulate the tone, which basically means the pitch. Okay, so that's the basic concept. Now, if you're loading your own samples in, right, any sample longer than a minute will be trimmed. So it's only going to allow you to have samples up to 1 minute long in the app, but you can load, you know, bigger ones. It'll just chop them. Generally, shorter samples are recommended, and the manual mentions ideal times of sample lengths for each layer. But really important to understand, you don't need to worry about, you know, making like perfectly looped samples or anything of that particular length. You can basically be pretty careless in how you chop your samples up because of the granular processing it uses. It just won't really matter. So you'll get, seamless loops anyway in this app. So, layers. The core layer, this is basically low frequency drones. Bassy stuff. Flow layer, here you can, if you're using your own samples, you're going to use things like voices or choirs, sustained tones, this kind of thing. Grain is more a layer for textures, like noise sounds and water or fire noises and stuff like that. Right? These kind of things. Shard. This layer, melodic fragments or sequences. Nice. Vocal melodies and stuff. Glow. Chime sounds, metallic sounds and stuff. Stuff that's a little bit bright. Okay. Now, here we have output level and shadow. That's basically a tail for the reverb. Different layers may have their own reverbs built into them, which is controlled by this space knob. So this is just a kind of global tail. And there are a few other parameters in here as well, some EQ type controls and exciter and stuff. Just jump forward to the next preset. Okay, so let's solo this layer here and look at the parameters. So on the main view, we only see the presence and tone knobs. Click on the parameters and we have presence and tone here, but we have all these other knobs that we don't see on the main UI. So first, I can bring the level of that up, right, with this presence thing. This is just the depth and rate of an LFO, and we have different LFOs here. And this is faster LFO, 8 seconds up to 180 seconds, very slow, right? So this is designed for slower stuff, so it doesn't have any kind of fast LFO options in it. You can play with the direction with negative or positive depth. Tone, so that's pitch, free pitch, up or down, 12 semitones, i.e. 1 octave. Again, we can modulate that. Note that this can only be modulated up to 1 semitone either way to make sure it sounds okay. So that's why this, even if you have your depth all the way up here, it just moves a tiny little bit. It's different from the other ones in that regard. Density. So the density of the grains, that's really not always very easy to hear. It might depend a lot on your other settings. I think we can hear it there. That's a little bit thinner, right? And that's thicker. But it is subtle. Detuning the grains. Again, that is pretty subtle. And space. So this will use different reverbs for different layers. For this one, it's very subtle because this one is the bass layer. Okay, here, this flow one. So basically similar controls, but here we also have a bandpass filter, and we can control the gain and the width and the rate of change in the filter frequency. So let's have a listen. Let's put it on a fast rate. With a narrower filter, and you can hear that. And again, we could change the LFO type. And some, EQ control as well. Okay, next, grain. So here, I think the only control that's different is the panning. Okay, next. Shard layer. So there's a few things worth looking at here. Let me just reset the knobs to their default values by double tapping. So I've put presence up here. So here we have tremolo, depth, and the frequency of the tremolo effect. Okay. Tone, depth, through LFO and so on for that. Length. So here we look at these three controls together, rate, shape, and length. So rate, here we have a very short rate, listen to that. Let's put a longer rate. So the rate is determining the length of a cycle. And here, because we have a very short length value here, now most of this cycle will be empty. And we'll only get sound coming in when the cycle goes back to the start, like now it must be at the start again. And we'll get some sound fragments here, and then we'll get silence again. So if we want that to behave differently, there's a few, we could bring the rate down, right? In which case we get something like this. Or we can keep a longer rate, but increase the length. And here, there might be silences. It depends on the audio that's been recorded for the sample. But generally it's going to be much fuller. We won't have it dialing in gaps. And then let's just bring it down to shorter rate and length again. So shape's just controlling a volume envelope. When this is down low, we get a sudden increase in volume. And if we put this up higher, we get a more gradual increase in volume over the duration of the cycle. Also, note this reverse button here. So that can be very nice on voices. Let's hear that on a voice. So this is forward. And this is reverse. Right? And we have another filter option in here. Which again can be modulated, and that's pretty fun. Again, various options here for the LFO type. And echo the time, half a second basically here. Echo presence, so it's very obvious. Here we just had a little tiny bit of echo. And here, space. Right? And then here, the glow layer. Mostly same sort of controls we've seen. Another filter option here, similar to the one in the last layer. What's new here? This diffuse just increase the reflections and the reverb. Okay, so let me just unsolo that and jump to another preset. So about the randomizer, we can randomize everything. So see, all the samples and various parameters and stuff will all be randomized. Like look, for example, here, it's strings theme 2. Now press all. Now it's synth theme 8, and these knob values also changed as well. Let me go to the next preset. So we could randomize only the parameters, so the samples don't change, or only the samples, so the samples change but the parameters don't change. Or we could change, randomize only the core layer or the flow layer, or so on and so on. F and C, if we click on options, we'll see there are two settings, one called freeform and one called constrained. So F means freeform, C means constrained. So basically here we have a few different settings for the different layers. For example, here we have settings for the core layer. Sample all, it just means when we randomize, it can pick from the user samples, the ones you imported, and the inbuilt samples, the samples that come with it, right? The library. Or we can choose to process incoming audio with this input. But that's separate. So here, sample all, it will choose when it randomizes from both user and library, or we can limit it to only user samples or only library samples. And this is about the changes that might happen with parameters. So if it's set to constrain, the random changes will be more constrained, they will be more limited in terms of what Igor, the developer, thinks is going to give you a very usable output that is maybe suitable for that type of layer, that's going to fit well in the overall thing. But if it's set to freeform, it might be crazier. It's still going to have some constraints. It's not completely random. There are some algorithms or whatever in there, but it's going to be freer than the constrain one. So input, this is a weird one, and this is where we start to get into the stuff that I think could seriously be improved. So now let me just so I've set the core layer to receive input, and I'm gonna solo it, and now I'm going to bring in this audio here. Let me let you hear this audio. That's what that is, right? So I bring that in, and it will start recording it, and you can hear it's already recorded it, and that's in there now. And if I change the sample or here, for example, or if I change the rate of the sample to speed it up, you'll hear now that's speeding up. And now if I take this off, that is recorded in there. And that'll just stay in there until I record something else. And so let's say I set this back to just this normal rate, and I bring it in here again. Now it will do a fresh recording, and that's in there now, right? So you can find in the manual details about how long the inputs should be for different layers. It's something like 5 seconds for some layers, 10 seconds for others. I can't really remember. But basically, if you're getting gaps when you have recorded stuff, it means that your input is a bit too short. So just make that input go in for longer. The disappointing thing to me is, I can't actually record. For example, I've now recorded that input into this layer. What I would like to do is load a completely different sample in here, right? And record that different sample into, say, the flow layer, and then do one for the grain layer, and then do one for shard, and then do one for glow, and have 5 different layers all made up with different input that I fed into it. And you cannot do that. And it's such a, for me, very strange and frustrating design decision. And I have mentioned this to Igor, and I don't know, he said, maybe he'll do something about it, but it didn't sound very definite. I think it's a real pity. You also can't save anything this is just like a temporary thing. For example, I can't kind of record that into the samples in the app, which I think is a pity, and I'll talk more about that later when I kind of discuss that in a bit more detail. It's one of my only real criticisms of the app. Let's jump on here. So these must be saved in the preset, because you can see here I change preset and it's all using the internal samples and stuff again. I find it very weird to have to go into the randomizer options and set up inputs for each layer. It's too many clicks. It's a bit annoying. I'm just looking at my notes here. Core, flow, and grain. The buffer size for layers when you're recording is for the core, flow, and grain, it's 5 seconds. For shard, it's 15 seconds. And for glow, it's 10 seconds. Okay. By the way, the stand-in version has a built-in recorder for recording the output of the app. If you're using the app in a host, like I'm using it in AUM here, then you would just use the recording system built into your host app, right? Listen to this one, this is nice. So let's take a little look at the sequencer. So the sequencer, you see down here, we can have different steps, and we set the length of steps here. Here we set how the sequence will run: forward, reverse, ping pong, or random. Let's just get the sequence going, maybe. Oh, well, let's stop it for a second and let me just dial in some things. So here we basically just change the presence and tone knobs to set them to how we want them to be when it hits that particular step, right? So just to make it simple here, I'm just going to make it 3 steps, and I'm just going to leave step 1 like this, and step 2, I'm going to go in here. Now I'm going to play with these presence knobs. Okay, and I'm going to leave it like that. Now I'm going to press on step 3, and I'm going to change a few of these things. Here I'm going to change the length of the steps. So let's just see what that's like now. So it stays on each step for 2 bars. Right, and if we think that's too fast, we can change the setting here. It's currently set to glide. So here I can adjust how long it takes for the knob to glide to the new value. Or instead of a glide, we can have a fade. So here we get cross-fading. So we won't actually get the tone, moving slowly up or down. We'll just get it cross-fading from one to the other. So I think both those lengths and times were a little bit short, so I will see with the longer one. If we have mute here, when I toggle play off, it'll go completely silent. If we instead leave this unmuted, here, even though the sequencer is not being used anymore, we'll still have audio. That's the difference. Copy next will copy whatever the current presence and tone settings are, and copy them and paste. It'll automatically paste them into the subsequent steps 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. Change a preset. So let me show you one of my things. So I spent a couple of days with this, but mostly I wasn't importing many of my own presets, and I was just trying to learn the app and experiment with what's already in it. But I wanted to see how easy I found it to set up my own thing completely from scratch. So here, this is using all my own samples that I imported. And it wasn't too painful a process, but it wasn't as easy as I would have liked, and I'll explain a bit more about that to you very shortly. So, like, this is the soundscape it has made out of those samples I put in. So let me let you just hear the samples that I used. So this was the first one, which I used for the core layer, the bass layer. This was the second one, which is for the flow layer. This was for the third layer, the one called grain. This was a little thing I recorded using the app Piano Tech. It's Rhodes. And I just recorded in a simple little progression in a whole tone scale. I do really like that though. Simple things are good for this app. That's the nice thing. You don't need like super complex stuff. This is for the final layer, the one called Glow. This was made using Booga, the new app by Heinbach and Audio thing. Right? So that's, like if I played all of those at the same time, that's what it would be like. And this is what I got it sounding like here in Exosphere. And I do like this. I could go in here and randomize only the parameters, let's say, so we keep all the samples. Or I could go in and just change one thing up. Like let's change this. Right? Using one of these bells. And then I could, play with the tone and stuff to get it to sound what I like, get it to sound how I like, set up the sequencer and so on. Let's try randomizing just the glow layer. Now let me randomize the shard layer. And now green. So you can see, during a performance, you can pretty much get away, I think, generally with changing these things out. And it's probably going to sound pretty good. And so you could also have a kind of performance where you're sort of curating things and changing things as you go along, that one didn't work so well. That one was a bit better, as long as you timed it well, maybe. It'd be good maybe if there was a setting to determine the fade time when you change the sample loaded in a layer like that, wouldn't it? By the way, one thing, it has a gate in it when you're recording. If you're using the input feature, the feature for processing input, which, by the way, let me let you just hear. Let me see. Let's take something like this, which is very lots of stuff going on. Let's see if we can get this working. So I had some difficulties earlier today when I was trying to record, and it just wasn't working, and I couldn't figure out what it was. And I contacted Igor, and he told me, make sure your samples are loud enough. But the sample I was trying to record, it was this actually, which goes to about -10 decibels. So I said, I think the gate or whatever that you're using here is far too aggressive. It was really confusing the hell out of me, why I couldn't get it to record. But anyway, if you have issues with it recording something, then just turn the volume up and hopefully that will resolve it, get it nice and loud. So this is what it sounds like when I set all the layers to input. And so it's all just processing that one input. But as I say, it's such a pity. I'd like to have different things recorded into each layer directly here in AUM. But, it's nice, isn't it? Of course, you're going to say, well, you can just use several instances, and yes, you can, but I'll talk about that more in a minute. But that is nice. I really like that. I really like that. So, on to my review. So, as I say, you can record into the AUV3, but you can't record something different into every layer, right? That really bothers me. It's very inconvenient. I really want to be able to record an input into one layer, then record a different input into another layer, and so on. So I just don't know why it's been done like that. So I thought, well, okay, look, let's just use different instances of this, right? Seems fine, right? But actually, it's very CPU intensive. And I'll go into detail about how CPU intensive it is in a minute. But yeah, it's hard on your CPU. It also drains the battery pretty quickly. I noticed the SAP as well. Thing with samples, so if you're not able to record audio in a host in a nice and easy way and stuff, and in the way that I kind of expect, then basically you have to use samples. And that's fine for some people. Some people like samples. They use a lot of samples. They have a lot of samples on their iPad and so on. But personally, I don't like using samples unless it's completely unavoidable. You end up with duplicates everywhere. I know people say duplicates might not take up, as much space as you think on the way the iOS system works. It's a bit confusing, that. But anyway, I don't know. I don't like it. It gets very messy. So you need to be mega organized with your samples if you don't want loads of files just scattered all over your device's storage, And it's just not the kind of thing that I enjoy dealing with. Even stuff like, naming samples and stuff, I just don't enjoy working with that kind of thing. So I would love to be able to just record. And Igor did say, maybe in the next version I'll add a recorder for each layer, but it sounds very non-committal. So I wouldn't think for sure. I wouldn't say for sure that's going to happen, but I hope it does. The other thing that this app needs, I think, badly, is multi-out, right? Why wouldn't I want to have multiple instances of this, but it's all the same instance. I don't want to explain in this video what multi-out is in detail, but basically it means that I could have the same instance of the app, but appearing on different channels, but it doesn't take up more CPU. And so then you can just play with the controls in one instance and the controls will change in all of those instances, right? And you can add separate effects to each layer, right? So I could use one instance of the app and I could put different effect on the core layer, a different chain of effects of my own effects, my own plugins on the flow layer and different on the grain layer and so on, right? But it's not multi-out, and it should be. And so many of Igor's apps would really benefit from being multi-out. So then again, the workaround would be use multiple instances, right? But this app is very CPU intensive and hard on the battery. And running 5 instances of this app in AUM, I tested it. I had an empty AUM session. I ran 5 instances of just this plugin. And, I soloed one layer on each instance, right? And that sent my M1 iPad Pro's DSP meter to 56%, right? And I know M1 is not the latest iPad or anything, but it's still a very, respectable iPad still. I find it generally absolutely powerful enough for everything that I need to do. If I change the buffer size in AUM to 2048, the very largest buffer size, that just shaves a few percent off the DSP. It brought it down to 50%. So that is not ideal for me. Another thing, I found myself wishing, if I click on Files, and here we have the samples that I brought in, I found myself wishing that I could rename samples inside the app, because actually this is something I forgot to mention when I was talking about the randomizer. If you bring a sample into this app and you name it in this way, let's say the sample, if I change the name to core and then space and then the name of the sample and then .wav, right? If it has that name, the app will know that that is intended for the core layer. And when I randomize samples in the core layer, it will pick samples which have the core prefix, or it will pick samples with no prefix, but it won't pick samples which have the prefix of a different layer, like flow or grain or shard and whatever. And it's a good way to do things in this app, because each layer has its own function and certain types of samples are designed to work in that. But because there's no ability to rename your samples or anything, I couldn't, I just can't do that here. If I wanted to start doing that, I'd have to re-import everything again, So this is why I don't like dealing with samples. It forces you to be more organized than you might be, or than you might want to be. So, none of that to say I don't like the app. I think it's a beautiful app. But that's a genuine grievance for me, these things that I'm talking about, the no multi-out, but especially the no ability to record directly into the amp in various different layers, which I explained earlier. Now, on a positive side, I will say this app is a lot simpler to learn than some of Igor's previous apps. It still took me a few very thorough reads of the manual to get clear in everything, but the learning curve for this app is much less steep than Noise Space, for example, or No Input Mixer, or certainly Beat Cutter, which is Igor's most complicated app by a country mile. Also, the UI on this app is much less cluttered looking than some of his other apps. It's nice and minimal and elegant. It's still not really the kind of UI that feels like an instrument, It's nothing like, say, an iOS classic, an iOS touchscreen classic like Sampler. This app is very much designed from a kind of hardware paradigm and that sort of thing. But I do like this UI much more than most of the other apps I've seen from Igor. The randomizer is super handy. It's a pity though, there's no undo and redo. And I've been saying for years that Igor's apps would really benefit from undo and redo. And any app with a randomizer would benefit from undo and redo. You do have quite a lot of control over the randomizer here. You don't have, super amount of control like you do, say, in audio thing apps, where you have a lock system and you can lock any parameter anywhere, and that will not be changed when you press the randomizer or when you change presets, right? So it doesn't have that, and that would also be good. I'm glad there are arrows for browsing the main presets, right? But it's a pity there are no arrows for browsing these layer samples, right? And it would be nice to be able to quickly audition these inbuilt samples, right? But I did mention that to Igor, and that's one of the things that he said he will definitely add in the next update. Let's see, but that's what he said to me. I will definitely add that. Great idea. A small thing, I do wish you could double tap. Hang on, it's working with a mouse? Okay, that's strange, hang on. Oh no, it's actually working now. Wow, that's weird, okay. Oh no, maybe that's only for samples. Yeah, okay, right. Strange. So you see, for samples, I can double tap. Oh, no, that's because it's single tap. Okay, right, no. I am right, yeah. So here in the preset browser, I don't know why you can't double tap, maybe, to select a preset directly. Instead, you have to just tap it and press set, which I always find a bit inconvenient. I just don't like that from a UI point of view. It's a very small point compared to my main criticisms, but I want to mention it anyway. There are also some weird labeling conventions, like why are these called tone, which to me sounds like an EQ control, but really these change the pitch, and they should, I think, 100% be called pitch. It's just another thing that is confusing. There are a few other little things like that, but yeah, I really enjoy the sounds this produces. It's not that hard, I think, to come up with your own soundscapes in this, and it's kind of fun to think about what's going to work well together, and you do get a feeling of satisfaction. I did enjoy coming up with this example. The only part that I didn't enjoy was I would like to have been able to just record everything inside AUM. I've already talked about that a lot, so I won't go on about that that much more. But in terms of the output, when I was writing up extensive notes about this earlier today, and when I was reading the manual again and stuff, I had one preset. I think it was this one my own, or I think it was one of the factory ones. I had one preset running in the background on my headphones for literally hours, and I found it super relaxing. I didn't get bored of it at all. So it is a very cool app. It would just be much better if I could record directly into it while it's loaded in a host, if I could maybe rename my recordings, and if it had multi-out. So, again, thanks for watching, everyone. Have a great day or evening, whatever time zone you're in. Take care.